So The Last of Us TV show was really successful, and I think it's going to change things for video games because...
I'm your daddy.
So The Last of Us TV show released and was very successful. Most successful video game to TV show adaptation, in my opinion. Not that there's many very good ones to pick from. After the success of The Last of Us adaptation, I think that's going to change how Sony approach The Last of Us as a franchise and potentially their other game series going forward. There's rumors of a Last of Us Part 3 game, which I'm hoping is true personally. That rumor has been circulating for a while, and I think Sony are absolutely going to try and push to get a Last of Us Part 3 made. They're 100% going to push this IP forward because what they are dealing with now, instead of having a successful video game series, they now have a successful multi-platform franchise. Having a successful cross-platform franchise is what any good media company wants. You look at Disney with Marvel and Star Wars. You look at any movies that like branch out into comic books or anime or whatever. You look at video games that branch out into comic books or anime or whatever else. All of that allows for a massive cross-pollination of consumers. We've already seen the results of this with The Last of Us. The video games both had a spike in sales after the series premiered. We saw this with Cyberpunk Edgerunners, that after that premiered, Cyberpunk 2077 had a massive spike in users, and I don't know about sales at that stage, but I assume so. I think something similar happened with The Witcher. You know, you have the Netflix series. You have The Witcher 3 getting a re-release that added content from the Witcher Netflix series into it. It all feeds into each other. It all allows for a much more successful franchise and a lot more sales, basically. Hey, speaking of cross-pollination of users, if you're enjoying this video, why not leave a like? It helps me out massively and pushes the video a lot up in the algorithm. And consider subscribing as well. I talk about a lot of stuff like this. So, yeah. Mild interruption, back to the video. Now, there's a lot of video game adaptations in the works. We have Fallout, we have Halo, there's a Gears of War adaptation. But in particular, I think that this is going to apply a lot to Sony because they have God of War coming up, Ghost of Tsushima movie, a Horizon series. They adapted Uncharted to little to middling success. I think Sony's movie division is usually a lot more interested in trying new things in the hope of getting the new, like the new hit franchise. You know, Morbius was a storm all across the globe. So I think they're the ones who will absolutely keep trying to get these successful video game adaptations. And there's both positives and negatives to attaining this success. For example, it like opens the series up to new fans, which is fantastic. I know a lot of people who have never touched video games who love the Last of Us series. It allows for more games in the franchise. I reckon we're going to get a Last of Us Part 3. I reckon we'll get some kind of Ghost of Tsushima successor if the Ghost of Tsushima movie is successful. There'll always be more God of War games, I bet, if they get a good series going. But then on the negative side, you know, you have the risk of any adaptation being crap. For example, there's a Horizon series that I think is being done by Netflix. I don't really have a lot of hope in that because it's Netflix. They usually kind of lowball stuff in terms of budget, but we'll see how it does. I think a lot of movie studios and TV studios want to just like get the next successful franchise with minimal effort. You do always run the risk of overexposure of a property as well, you know, like that people could just get sick of it if you have, you know, new games and new comics and new TV shows and new whatever else, and like you're just seeing it everywhere. There is always that risk. I don't think it's a very large risk at the moment because there's not a lot of great video game adaptations, but that being said, it is a possibility. And one very specific thing that I would be worried about with this in terms of game creation is that it could kind of stifle creativity with regard to the game. You know, if you're making a game that's going to be deliberately turned into a movie, or that they think early on will be a successful movie franchise, they might gear towards making it in such a way that it's much more adaptable instead of making it to the original creator's vision. I mean, the Ratchet & Clank remake is kind of an example of this because they tried to do it where both things informed each other on the story, but it didn't really work. and the movie wasn't great, the game isn't that great in my opinion. It kind of fell a bit flat. Now it's very early on to be saying this, but there's already a lot of video game adaptations in the works, and I think that it would be a bit foolish to say that this wouldn't change the approach of how certain companies will approach their video game franchises going forward. Because there's a very big difference in a company just having a successful video game being made versus showing that they can grow an intellectual property beyond one entertainment medium. You know, it opens them a lot more up as a business if they show that they can take this one thing and make it successful in multiple forms of revenue. Look at Apple. They started out in computers, they got into smartphones, they're now working on TV stuff, they're doing smartwatches. There's a lot of like branching out there that they have been successful in multiple platforms. So yeah, we've gotten one good video game adaptation. Hopefully we get more good adaptations, but I think it's going to be interesting looking forward to seeing how companies may change their behavior in terms of both video games and movies and TV shows, instead of, you know, a few years back where it's just video game focused. Shying away. I'll be coming for you. Okay. Take.